Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Community with Co-Unity. I am really excited as always, having another guest, having another conversation. This one will be quite fun. We have Coop. I like to say he was first an avalanche, now he's a tornado. The man's a walking natural disaster. Well, what does that mean? Well, he was at Ava Labs before, avalanche, and now does a lot of work with NATO, the perp decks, and in the ink ecosystem. So yeah, without further ado, I can see him smiling in the backstage here. I'm gonna have him hop on and do his own little intro.
Thanks, Dan. That is good. I had not thought about that. Walking disaster, natural disaster. It's pretty good. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, no, I think like, the experience that I have across these different ecosystems and just throughout our previous conversations, I think you've always got great ideas on elements. And so I think this will be a really fun conversation and also give me an opportunity to learn a bit more about you and your background, your experience. So yeah, maybe you want to start with just like a little bit of who is Coop? Tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah, sounds good. So, um, who is Coop? Well, I think in the community and marketing context, I've been in digital marketing for a while. Nobody knows how old you are, that sort of thing. And I've actually been in it for like 14 years, which feels like forever. And I did not start in community or socials. I started in paid ads and performance marketing, and I was actually search marketer of the year from some like prestigious,
Look at
search
that
marketing
hardware.
thing. Yeah, I know. I keep it on my desk. Um,
Nice.
and then I really moved over to community and social in when I came to crypto. So like 2021. So it's been a good amount of years now, and I have some unique experience being in crypto and working full time in it since then. Um, yeah, it's not something everybody gets exposure to, so it's been fun, and I really like the community focus and socials because it's so much more people driven than what I was doing, which is like very data focused. Yeah, that's me.
Curious to know like that jump in 2021, like what pulled you into crypto world. Everyone has such a unique story to that.
Yeah. Well, I had been buying crypto for a little while, and uh, never a lot, but I always found it interesting and exciting. And I grew up on the internet too, playing video games. So it's like a natural draw to people like us that just like the internet. And I think NFTs were one of the big things. It's like owning this piece of digital art, and of course, the mania around it. Um, and I was working at a startup at the time that I felt like had come to a point where um, they had essentially like achieved what they set out to with one part of the business, and they were looking for like new things to do, and I just wasn't that into the newer things. And at the same time, DeFi was blowing up, and I had started to dig into that, and I joined a Twitter space with a team that was talking about careers in crypto, and then ended up just DMing with the account, and they were like, actually, we need a marketer right now. And I joined the team. So it was a big jump because, it's crypto and it was some young startup, and you've got no idea how it's going to go. And it all felt a little crazy, but it also was just like the right time for me to do something new.
Interesting. How was that when it came to, so from a professional layer, that is quite unique actually, where you literally jumped into a role and you had to figure out this new way of being in a certain sense right away and how to apply to your work, versus a lot of people kind of started to dabble quite a bit in it and then was like, I want to work in this industry.
Okay, so yes, but I think I forgot to mention that I had also started a YouTube and a Twitter account, um, specifically about crypto and the things in this ecosystem. It was actually in the Avalanche ecosystem, and so that experience helped me get into the mindset, and and thinking about what I had just said about my experience prior to this. I forget that I had started a brand on TikTok doing organic social as well. And so like those experiences where I was doing it for myself, really helped me like figure out what this brand should be doing and pick it up quickly. Yeah. And
Totally.
I had a guy, so when I joined, it was Pangolin, it was decentralized exchange on Avalanche. It was like
Mm.
early days there. Um, the guy that hired me had been running the Twitter for a while. And so it was a bit of like apprenticeship with him almost, to say like, yeah, run ideas by, get a gut check, because that experience can be an absolute shit show. I almost wanted to like put on some influencers who were just completely botted and like, fake. And at the time, I just didn't have the context to know that. Like they looked like good accounts, um, and the guy I was working for at the time was like, "Do you know these people? Like, have you ever seen them?" I was like, "No, I guess I haven't." And he was like, "Yeah, I haven't either." And so I don't think we should do this. So you definitely need some guidance when you're first coming into the industry. But now, after so many years of just staring at Twitter, yeah, it's natural.
Yeah, crypto Twitter world. I think like it's definitely a big thing when it comes to the whole vanity metric space. And it even got exaggerated when these Info5 platforms
Oh
were
yeah.
just starting to run super rampant. And I was actually quite happy around the whole. cracking down on it and the depth of info file. I wrote like an article about it, but like it kind of like increasingly got worse, I feel like. And then people were just leaning into too much of this gamification and the rewards element, and then it was like, well, wait a minute, why are we even here? It's like
Yeah.
we got wrapped up into all that so much we even forgot about the brands and the companies and projects that it was supposed to be about, you know? I
Yeah,
mean,
a
did
lot
you
of
see some
times.
of that? Did you see
Yeah,
some of that like exaggerate? What are your thoughts there?
for sure. Yeah, it got crazy, and like many trends in crypto, it was a felt fast to me. It was like all of a sudden everyone's doing this, and the discussion around it is really hot, and then it was just gone. Um, just like crypto as a whole. Um, and I did not run it. I didn't run any of it because I've kind of been around incentives for a lot of my career, um, incentivizing actions. And so to me, I just felt like it was a vanity metric driver. And my team at the time was not that into vanity metrics. And, it depends. Like sometimes you work for a company and they're like, yeah, that's what I want to see. I want to see like big numbers. I want to see impressions. And that's what I care about. And as a marketer, you might say like, here's why I don't think that's the best thing to focus on, but they still might come back and say like, do it anyway. um, but I was at Avalanche and we weren't worried about that, and we wanted it to feel real, and we had a good gut on like what is actually working and like who are the people having the right conversations for our audience. So never got drawn into it. Didn't run a campaign. Just watched.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more and more people who are thinking on direct attribution, and especially as you get deeper into bear markets, it's like, well, we need to make revenue. There needs to be real things that we actually end up getting from our what we're investing into, and where we're getting customers, users, and our business model, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely in the bear market, everyone's asking those questions.
Yeah, no, totally. I guess like just to kind of rewind a little bit more though and walk through timeline side of things. I'm curious with your time at Avalanche. I always like when I think of Avalanche, I instantly kind of always think of Web3 gaming. There is a component that was like a majority, is that right, of what Avalanche was really doing? Like they kind of hit that niche more and more and more
I
from
don't
what
know
I
if I've.
understood.
I'm not sure if you know this, but that was like directly my role was Avalanche is gaming. And I yes, like at one point I felt like we were, you know, heavily impacting Web3 gaming, and it had the best games at certain points. Um, their strategy though was not intended to be like the gaming network. It was really trying to target many different verticals at once. Just so happened, I think, that gaming did turn out to be like one of their top ones for a while. Um, yeah, and they also had this specific selling point to games, um, which was like have your own network and run your game on that network. And if you're a great game that intends to like be the next Fortnite, but with ownership of your in-game stuff, you're going to need something that feels super fast and smooth because users don't want to feel Ethereum mainnet type vibes. And it made a lot of sense and worked really well in those scenarios. So I think that's how we ended up being like a great spot for them.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious on your take then when it comes to gaming. And I mean, yeah, it's great. It's good to know. Like I think of Avalanche, I think more of gaming, and you helped with a lot of that in a certain sense, like that market awareness and everything. But like Web3 gaming to me, I wasn't as deep myself as like a gamer or anything, but from what I understood, like I feel like it kind of ran off a bit of the edge of like a cliff. Like all of a sudden it was like Web3 gaming hit like a pretty big dive from a market perspective. And I don't know if it was because gaming in its own self is about like having fun, and then it's all of a sudden you're bringing in like a financial layer to fun. I'm curious to
Yeah,
get your take on it overall when it comes to the Web3 gaming space.
it's tough. I mean, well, the first thing to say about gaming is that it is a hits driven business and it is very hard. Uh, being hits driven really just means like most games fail, and
Mm,
you're either a hit or you die. And um, even the hits that we think of right now, like Fortnite, almost didn't make it. Like there was a period where they were just not getting any players, and they were marketing themselves and whatever. And if they had continued on that trajectory, they would not be here today. Um, and so I think you have to start from that, like understanding that most games fail, and then there's a big dichotomy in the industry between like you need to make a really fun game that just kind of has this stuff in the background. Like we need Fortnite, but it's all on chain and you don't even really know. That's like kind of that was one type of thinking. And then the other one was like, no, these are degenerate, like gambling games, basically, and economic games. And nobody cares about what it looks like. And it doesn't need to look great like a normal game, whatever. And I was kind of on the like the more we need a great game front because I just didn't think the economic game model has a big enough potential audience because then it's like crypto people mostly, and we're always trying to like get outside of that. But if you're playing in the like in that space, now you've kind of made it harder for yourself. You're like, you need to make a great game that it's already very difficult to succeed in that world. And now you're like all of your press and like any influencer coverage also mentions that you do something with crypto, and like nobody likes crypto, and especially gamers for a long time were very against it because the first crypto games sold $1 million plots of digital land and it was crazy. And so that didn't work out in my opinion. Like it was too hard. Nobody's cracked it clearly. But we still do see the economic games, and they're like,
mhm.
you know, they're still kind of around. Like there's some on Solana, and the degens love that. And so I don't think that the whole concept has died forever, but it is certainly like not in a successful spot today.
No, it was a bit of like there's a storm of a few kind of components there, and
Yeah.
maybe just a bit of a deeper bear and a revival aspect where more and more I think of the technology of blockchain, people will get more used to it kind of being under the hood and the UX side of it. This is, I guess, the optimistic side of me is just going to keep abstracting away and then the
I
value will
think
start to
that's
flow.
to me, that's like also Web3 gaming really started off the back of Axie Infinity, and they didn't start
Mm,
with some like, and you can go further back than that. Like they had inspiration from Crypto Kitties, but um, they didn't start with some like crazy VC round and 6 years of building a game. They were pretty grassroots. And so I think that's how it'll start again when it does
mm.
eventually is like there's going to be another probably economic focused game that comes out of nowhere and is like, oh, this is pretty cool again. Like, hey, maybe there's something here. And hopefully that experimentation drives more interest again. I just don't know when.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually like amazing to me. I was at the a hackathon at ETH Denver, and one of the hackathon projects, I mean, AI right now is just getting insane with what you can use with Cloud Code. And this one hackathon project was a bunch of university students, and they made this version of a game they called like Stake Clash, which was about like staking different assets, and then your yield became resources in a game. And they built the whole game with graphics that was like playable in like a 3-day hackathon, which was
Yeah.
just like blew my mind from like
Yeah.
how impressive it was.
So
So I
true.
think like there's gonna be an interesting element where like obviously the barrier to develop a game now, like
Yeah,
studios are getting way smaller and whatnot. If
yeah,
someone can find that magic combination of like economic incentives and also really fun, and then it just, decentralized boots up in different kind of countries, we could see maybe another Axie Infinity aspect kind of, come out of nowhere, right?
yeah. I can totally see it. As long as crypto itself is on the rise, it's gonna. I'm gonna keep looking for those opportunities for sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess funny enough, I wore this shirt from, I think this was Eat Denver House of
Oh,
Ink.
nice. Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, so good little gear shift here. Want to hear like a little bit on jumping into the ink ecosystem,
I
and
think
how that hop has been, and your kind of what you've been focusing on lately there, and yeah, well, that was not that long ago either, right?
no, not that long ago, and it's I think some people call it the ecosystem. Um,
Easier to say.
everyone loves to like attach your name to some other words. Um, yeah, so I have been um, working in it for like 4 months now, and it's a different. I mean, it's all a lot of differences. There's a lot of differences between Ink and the Avalanche ecosystem, um, and I really appreciate them. So like, big thing is that they're a lot more vertically integrated. And Ink is still pretty new as a ecosystem and a blockchain. And so I think they came at it with a slightly different thought process, um, more of one that thinks like we can't just build a blockchain and people are going to show up and like make it great for us. Like we have to be deeply involved in the protocols that are live on Ink and uh, yeah, make sure they're valuable and help them get there. And a lot of teams do that through just broad ecosystem grants and investing. And there's some of that at Inc., but it's much more hands-on with Inc. or with NATO and Tydro specifically. So I help run socials for each of them to varying degrees. And I really like that approach because at Avalanche, that was one of the big struggles. It was like, we've invested in or given grants to all these teams that have had a great pitch, but like, what is the success rate of that team going from the pitch to actual outcome on chain? Well, it turned out that especially in gaming, that takes a really long time. Now, like you said, AI is speeding that up, but like a AAA game like Off the Grid, who I think Tyler mentioned, it was years. It was like 5 years before the game was ready. And so someone at Avalanche made that decision 5 years ago to like give them that first grant. And then they had to wait, all that time. And so there's a component of it that's like, well, I don't think they want to wait forever for protocols to come to fruition. And they don't. The other thing that happens is like they just get stolen. I think Mega ETH has recently been dealing with this, where like they had some great promising teams in their Mega Mafia program that just left. They were like, yeah, thanks for the help early on, but like contractually, there's nothing here, so we're gonna go take a grant somewhere else. And that happens to every chain. And I think
Yeah.
it's a pity and really leaves the control out of their hands. So I've appreciated that Inc. is a little more hands on in that.
Interesting. Yeah, I like the grant treadmill that you see some of these startups going through where they're just like going from one ecosystem to the next, and it happens across even the board, even with hackathons and all sorts of
Yeah,
elements.
yeah, everything.
There's no like loyalty aspect to a lot of these ecosystems, even if they throw a bunch of money their way, right?
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, no, I guess curious then to dive into this layer when it comes to, from gaming at Avalanche to more like traders, from like a profile component to who you're targeting and focused on, I guess more around like NATO specifically. And
yeah.
maybe actually if you wouldn't mind, like give us a quick rundown for people who are not aware of what NATO is and Tydro, and then we could talk a little bit about what's it like going from kind of gaming community gamers to traders.
Yeah. Yeah, so NATO is a perpetuals DEX, um, one that is really trying to turn it into something that is appealing to all of finance. Um, because I think like obviously Hyperliquid has been amazing and kind of opened a lot of eyes to the opportunity, but there are so many features and opportunities to like keep improving on this. You know, it's still a young category. Um, so that's where NATO is today. And in terms of like trying to appeal to a different audience, yes, it's traders instead of, well, game devs and gamers. But the thing is like that we still cared so much about those audiences at Avalanche, right? Like, yes, at the end of the day, we needed the devs and the gamers because that's like what the actual product was. But like Avalanche, you know, it has a token that I think, you know, they care about. And so understanding traders being part of that culture while mixing in or like being a part of the gaming side was really important. So, and before that, I was at a decentralized exchange again. So um, that experience has been helpful coming back over to NATO, being more focused on traders again. And I think, yeah, working for a decentralized exchange prior to Avalanche was really important. And then, you know, I like over the past couple of years, it's felt like crypto people have come to the realization that trading is the core kind of product of crypto, or at least that's what I see a lot of people say. And so I think I felt that way for a couple of years too. It's like, yes, even in the gaming side, like what are we really enabling? It was trading, right? Like it's gaming, but also trading your skins. And maybe it's not as focused on like, you know, the trade aspect, but that's what we were selling. So yeah.
Interesting. I think like I had a question actually written down here, and this is a good time to bring it up. But like, there's a lot of competition also with trading platforms, and there's also a lot of elements where I feel, crypto Twitter, like everyone's kind of marketing to some of the same bubble in a certain
Oh yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And with that element of like a high amount of competition for traders who are really doing like real volume and aspects that move the needle for these projects, like how do you think through um, your strategy around attracting and retaining those traders onto NATO?
Mm. I think part of being a part of NATO and I like to call it the Kraken ecosystem, and I'm not sure if other people call it that, but that's how I feel. Is like we are a part of the Kraken ecosystem, not necessarily like a part of Kraken itself, but like you know, in the right area, right? And they have so many great relationships with traders that we've been learning from, and I think the truth is, like, I help on social specifically for NATO, and there's another guy named Jack who's leading growth, and so like we're getting into his territory a little. But the what I see is that we really talk to those guys who are the professional traders who care about this stuff, and like they do it every day, and we take a lot of guidance from them on what other traders might care about to get them to switch, what they care about in general. And I think that's really impactful and important because so many times you're just guessing. You know, you're
Mm,
if you're not the target audience, it's sometimes very hard to know what's going to matter to them. And so having this kind of group because of you know our closeness to Kraken and the traders there has been really important.
that's interesting. Yeah, no, I could totally see obviously like the Kraken ecosystem clout in a certain sense and the relationship layer to it to be able to listen to like the most ideal customer profile. And then yeah, I've definitely seen the way that you guys have shipped feature updates and feature components here and there quite quickly that are helpful components stacking into the product that slowly make it better and better, right? I mean, like some of those differentiators that came from those, um, traders that you listen to. I'm not sure if you wanted to mention any of them. Like I was curious around like a big aspect, like it's even put on the bio of like trade with unified margin, right? It's a component
Yeah.
too. Is that like one of the kind of core elements that came from some of those people, or tell me more about some of the feature layer?
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the guys that's very, public about this is Ponzi Trader.
Mm,
Um, he's got a big following. He's a great trader. I think his official thing is like that he says he's an advisor for the group, and he definitely does give a lot of input. And I think unified margin is one of those things that a lot of people feel is a big opportunity because it unlocks efficiency for portfolios. And so what that really means is like everything in your account can basically be used for margin on trades, on any trade, ideally. And it unlocks a lot of specific trades, that people want to make that, like delta neutral strategies, that sort of thing. But then I think broadly, it's like there aren't many venues like that where you can cross crypto and stocks and equities and commodities. And that is, I think, what the future looks like is
mm.
all of those things in one portfolio that you can trade against and balance yourself instead of balancing them as individual legs of trades, which is what people do today. You might not have access to that specific trade on the same venue, and so they're taking one leg of a trade on one venue and another leg on another venue, and like it sounds like a pain in the ass, but there's also beyond that, I think like some efficiency in the actual trade using the same markets. So that is a big one, yes.
Yeah, and I guess it really also does help just having that degree of trust with the big Kraken ecosystem kind of layer to it where people who are moving lots of money and whatnot, they want to
Yeah,
think in a project they have that trust feeling with, you
right.
know?
That's certainly why, like, a big part of why I wanted to come work with these teams is that I felt like Kraken has the reputation and longevity. They just posted it's their 15th birthday yesterday. Okay,
I was gonna say, I
15?
saw that.
15. That's like, it's about to be able to drive. And I don't think there's ever been like, a major exploit or anything. They have a great reputation. And I also have noticed that their own business is a bit more institutional um, than I think I realized at first. And those institutions, uh, they really care about custody and safety, obviously. And I think those things are going to help every project that is related to it.
Yeah, no, I think they did an amazing job with obviously the partnerships, the ecosystems, the institutions. You see a lot of projects. I'm curious if you're taking this from a marketing flow too. Go kind of top down with like institution towards more grassroots like people, and it's like, big money and then moving down to like smaller dollar versus other maybe projects or startups also think about like getting people to test and getting the smaller dollar and then working their way up to like bigger buyers after they've kind of gotten more and more of that trust, right? But
Yeah.
because you're in this kind of element of the Kraken ecosystem, it's like you kind of have those big stamps and you can get those big dollars, and then that just like cascades quite well, you know?
I think so, but it does depend on the product, and that's also been an interesting part of my time here so far. Is working across the three is quite different than just working on a chain. So like Tidro is, I think, the most ready and capable for institutions, and NATO, wants the institutions, but also has to balance the retail side. And then Inc. again is a mix of it all. But I think bringing those groups together is like the real power. You kind of want both, and I think that's where Inc. has a lot of potential for both.
Totally. No, I 100% see that. Well, I'd love to shift a little bit of another gear in towards kind of the community strategy layer and talking about community. And where I generally start with this, and we've already touched some aspects as well, is this is a question that I ask every single guest who comes on the podcast, and there's no wrong answer, but I think we found that community is such a buzzword depending on who you're asking and
Yeah,
depending on
yeah.
what it's being applied to.
Hmm.
And so without further ado, the question is, how do you define the word community?
I like the definition that kind of focuses on a separation between audience and community, um, where community is actually like building stuff and taking a more active role, and it's not just people who like your tweets, but it's the people who like discuss it with their friends and maybe build a little dashboard. Especially with AI now, we see so much of that. Like you can build a little something on top of your favorite project. Those are the real. That's community level to me, um, and it does. I don't know how you feel about this, but my role is social, probably social first with community, and I think it pairs really nicely, because you have a lot of people that are in that audience stage, and your job is to just like bring them into community, but you're the right person to do that because you see them on socials. That's Yeah,
Nice.
that's what I think. What do you think?
Well, honestly, like there's this great analogy, or I guess you could, yeah, analogy really, of the difference between audience and community, which you might appreciate, which is an audience is when you're up on stage and all the chairs are facing towards the stage and they're facing one way and everyone's just like taking in the content or throwing a like or clapping.
Yeah.
Community is then when there's no longer a stage there and all the chairs are turned in little circles here and there and people are talking to each other and there's components of the value that they're getting and just from the conversations that they're having with each other and the things they're doing, the things they're building, right? It's just the chairs are turned towards each other, not all one way,
Yeah, I
which I
like
think
it.
is a great component to what you kind of mentioned there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I don't
nice.
know if you'd build on it or anything that you'd add to that. I know.
uh no, I think that's, yeah, that sounds nice.
Yeah, but honestly though, I think I'd be curious to hear more around this blend of the funnel and of like marketing to community and that blurry line between those two. Because I think also there was some research that I did a few years ago. I was taking screenshots of the onboarding experience for every single Web3 project, going from their social, going into their Discord, and then I would take screenshots in their Discord, and I have, I think, 72 projects in a FigJam file, just every screenshots of every single onboarding flow. And I started to think through this thing called like the OX, which is the onboarding experience. There's user experience, UX, there's DX, developer
Mm-hmm.
experience. But to me, onboarding experience was, and I still think kind of is, one of the most difficult and one of the most probably things that have been done the worst in the Web3 space. Like so many people go from the social side and then they join the community and then they don't know where to go next, right? Or they just like don't get nurtured at all and then they just bounce.
Yeah.
Curious to hear some of your take on like what do you think about the OX, the onboarding experience in the space, and how do you think through, planning for it, optimizing it, setting it up in better ways? Like, what does conversion look like for you?
I think a lot of the time, community is an initiative driven by your marketing and or maybe your social media person, and not driven by founders. And so it tends to be under appreciated and thought about, really. And so it's like a word that people think they care about, but I guess I'm just saying it's underfunded and underappreciated. So like a lot of it is pretty rough, and there's no activation after you dropped into a Discord. And like what I see the most is there's just a Discord, or there's just a Telegram, and there's nothing really else going on. You might have some mods, um, but turning that into something that's great is the drop off. And I think it just comes down to like focus and budget. Like so many teams are small around here. They don't have budgets. You know, they have a couple of people. And so the best they can do is sort of Discord. And that's why I think teams like CoUnity are well positioned in this space, um, because there is so much opportunity to do it better, but limited resources to do it. And so they might be willing to pay something, but they don't have another person to focus on it. Yeah, I'm not sure if I've really said anything in there, but I think underfunded, dropped into a Discord, that's basically all you get.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the shout on that layer in a certain sense. And honestly, to what you're saying is one of the reasons why we have positioned ourselves in this way. There's a lot of agencies out there where they do A to Z, they do the KOL influencers, the PR, the ads, and then it's like, and we do community management,
Yeah,
right? It's like we can do it all really well. Whereas us, we're like, we don't do any of those things, but we do community really well. And this is like everything we're, talking to other founders about, talking to their marketers about, and really thinking through.
big fan of
So
that because like I don't know if I said this, but the start of my career in digital ads was all at agencies, and they only did paid search for a long time. And I take that with me everywhere because the focus was so important to their success. And yeah, I feel like it's absolutely the right move to have one area of focus.
yeah, and I think it's a bit of a category that's as you mentioned, like not fully appreciated, underfunded, but it's a category that's going to become more and more valuable and important because I think where we're going with technology, like the value in retention and loyalty and building a moat around your brand with community is getting more and more effective and more needed because the marketing acquisition side is just starting to bombard our brains and eyeballs with more
Yeah,
ads and more creative and more of this, right? So
it's
that's kind of
definitely
another ethos to it.
it's becoming a popular theory that um, a lot of the spaces we spend time in today are going to die because they're like so saturated with slop and bullshit and ads and all that, and that Discord and small communities are going to be the future of marketing. And I'm not totally sold on that. I think it's a little optimistic because we all like hate what's happening with social media these days, but nobody stops.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I think there's a degree, I think, where we're also seeing in communities more of the IRL world pop
Yeah,
up more
yeah,
people doing more grassroots events things and get out of their office, get out of their,
yeah,
out of their work world and meet with other people. And hearing the Elon Musk's projections around, he even said in an interview the other day, he was like, in 2036, you don't need to worry about money. He's like, 10 more years.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
was like, wow, that's pretty utopian in a certain sense. But like, those types of experiences that connect us, I think at the end of the day, if you look to our kind of core ethos is, in our brains and what we like connection is a really core component that drives us from what we are all about, right? Um,
yeah,
so it's
yeah.
just tapping into some of those. But yeah, I got another question. I'm curious around any sort of lessons or stories from your time at Avalanche that kind of come to mind with community or marketing that would be willing to share that you're like, ooh, this was a good example of something we did, or this was an example of something we did bad that we should have done differently afterwards. Any sort of lessons or stories there?
Hmm. I think one lesson, I'm not even sure if it came from Avalanche directly or just a little before that, but was, um, and I probably need to do a better job of it here, is like especially early on in a community activation or a community space like a Discord, you have to be the community because nobody's gonna just come in and like build it for you. You can set up the Discord and maybe even like plan a couple of activations. But if you're not in there talking to people, someone isn't in there talking to people, it's just going to die and it's not going to work. And so you should be in there starting the conversations around like whatever you think we should be talking about. Um, Now that I'm saying it, it almost sounds a little obvious, but I think it gets missed a lot, and people just don't take it seriously enough that like, yeah, you have to start the conversations. Nobody else is going to just come in and like be the life of the party for a while. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, that has been important for me.
You know, it makes me think a lot about the focus on founder-led marketing.
Yeah,
If you're a founder, you should be doing founder-led marketing. You'd be on LinkedIn, talking about the technology or the thing and, getting people excited about it. And that's, again, it's like you being on stage and talking to people in the chairs. But I definitely think there's an opportunity to think through this label of founder-led community, right? And what does that
yeah,
look like? You're walking
yeah,
around the circles of the chairs, the people in the workshops, and giving them prompts. You're like telling them,
yeah.
hey, work on this, guys. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think about this?
It's so
And that,
hard to get a founder to do that, but
yeah,
it is
I know.
huge. I mean, like uh, at Avalanche, I didn't start there at the start of Avalanche. So Avalanche was already very like established, and there was just the founder at that point in time was like so insanely busy with what everyone felt was more important. And I've yeah, so I think people just founders have a hard time making time for community in general, but it would be huge if you have them in there. And I've seen people say that about like Jeff from Hyperliquid, and um, like that he's literally in the Discord and saying, talking sometimes, and how important that is to people. But again, we all like undervalue it, and like you tell that to a founder who's semi established, and I just feel like they're gonna be like, no, definitely not.
Yeah. Especially the more they're leaning towards the institutional dollar as well. They're
Oh
like,
yeah, right.
it's like
Yeah.
a priority aspect. But when you think about just the compounding effect of the grassroots layer and, where this community lives all around the world in different places, I think there's oftentimes a lot of institutional conversion that happens because there's a bit of a movement happening within that country, within that, space that actually helps get their attention in one way or the other, right?
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting one to kind of get into, right? Um,
it is.
but cool. Okay, so I would love to share a little bit of this framework that I put together. I'm actually going to
Yeah,
share my
let's do it.
screen here in a second and go through this. I might have to, let's see here. Da, da, da. Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. Let's see here. Oops. I am loving using Claude to create HTML files, little tip, where
Yes.
you basically just make like little mini web pages or websites, right? And they're dynamic, they're super clean looking, and a few little quick, you know, versions here, and you can get something real nice. So here we go. What we're talking about is referral growth, referral strategy, how that layers into kind of community. So I'm just gonna like do a little overview of this, kind of explain this model to you, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts and your ideas, and we can just jam on this topic a little bit about referrals. Um, this is funny. So this headline header here is your community has a reproduction number, and the component is that there's a really interesting formula or factor which is about K, and it's like K equals participation times yield or C times I, and it actually came from the medical world when it came to like bacteria spreading in a little petri dish here. You can see this little animation. If the K factor is greater than one, it's like growing and expanding. And if it's less than one, then it kind of like peters out and burns out. And so when you take that to like the marketing world, and Hermosi has also talked about this, if you can have like a K factor greater than one, it means that the people within your community or people using your product or your customers are referring more than like your churn rate so that you're growing at like a quite substantial exponential kind of rate without any money spent on marketing, right? It's kind of like the concept and the ethos. And so you can play around with numbers like on this little calculator here. But the one thing about referral and like these two factors of participation and the yield, so being like participation is how many of your members, how many of them actually, bring people in. So if you've got 20% of your members, that's probably pretty high. Like 1 in 5 of your members is actually going out to someone. And then how many people are they actually bringing in each? Like how many people? Um, to think about that just referral side is like this K factor component. But then often not thought about is like the churn. Because if you have like a really high churn, you probably need to be thinking about fixing your churn first before you think about like getting into referral strategy and how are you going to like optimize for referrals, right? And it's really fun to kind of play with some of these numbers and things for projects and look at like if you've got a high churn and quite quiet participation with your referral strategy and a low component of the average amount of people each person is actually inviting, you're just losing so much more. It's like a very leaky bucket, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you're bringing in more people participating and you actually get your churn really quite low, it really changes a lot of the dynamics of what happens with like the formula here. So I thought this is a really fun topic to just like play around and talk about when it comes to almost almost like the physics of referrals, right? um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm curious to know what bubbles to the top of your head when you think about referral strategy, when you hear some of these things, like what comes to your mind?
Well, I love this little HTML site. It's a great way to show it. And I bet it was not that crazy to create. So it's cool. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I feel like the marketing team, well, all of this is sort of their domain, but on the churn side, um, it feels less controllable sometimes. You might not know. And I think, frankly, I think exchanges just have, there's just a natural churn rate for certain products that you have to expect. And maybe like this type of a calculation can help you think that through, but not necessarily eliminate it. But then you have more levers on the participation side to pull. Um, and I think NATO is like working through some of these right now, making it so that it's easy for anybody to participate and actually gain something from their participation. So like we have more opportunities around that to improve it. Um, and I bet a lot of businesses just don't even know what these look like for them. I mean, I couldn't tell you truthfully about like our churn rate for sure. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean the thing about it I would say is like it depends on, what action are you actually considering as churn or what action are you considering as like a successful invite, you know? People may sign up to the platform, may just be straight signups, but then do they deposit anything into the platform, you know? And at what point do you consider that like a conversion as like a successful inbound side of things or a successful referral? And then on the churn side, like are you talking about just community engagement and activation within, signing up and then just being active in conversation? Because to your point, some of these products people just buy and hold. They just buy
right.
something and they just hold it and they just don't do anything with it. It's like, are they a churn or are they just like someone who is a customer, obviously withholding and getting like yield or whatever, but they're not actively trading. So you can also, I think this happens with a lot of, I'm big into data analytics and we go very deep on this with a lot of our clients and projects. And it really does come down to this degree often on like what are you actually defining on some components to these metrics, and then how are you really tracking it consistently so that you can actually do something with it, because I think there's a big also pitfall for projects to track data, to have analytics, and they're like, yeah, we got numbers, we have a dashboard, we put numbers in front of them, people or our boss every week, but then it's like if you're not doing anything as much with the numbers, if they're not driving those insights, if they're not thinking about like, okay, well now if we do this campaign or switch up, the incentive layer around this, increase more status component, or have something where maybe they could win something next, for the next season, like making it different. How does that change our numbers? And
Yeah.
I think that's where also it becomes a little bit more kind of science mixed with art versus just like straight, cookie cutter flowing away.
It makes me think there's also something else I've encountered multiple times working in crypto is there is hesitance to even collect data. Um,
mm,
because we want to respect our users, and a lot of what they care about is being private and all that, which I think is totally fair. But I've had some teams that they didn't want to install Google Analytics on the website. They were like, that level of care for their customers' data. And so I've actually felt like overall my experience is that they don't track a lot of this, and they just don't have the data, and they're going off vibes more often. And also, I think like when you're dealing with venture funded startups, I'm actually curious what you think about this, but like my head goes to the fact that almost everyone is venture funded, and like their idea of how you achieve growth is more outbound than community driven. And
mm,
so they think like we are going to scale the shit out of this with ads or with
mm.
influencers or whatever, the top of the funnel. And they're not focused on retention at all because, well, sometimes they're just starting, but also I just think that's the culture of venture funded startups. What do you think?
Oh man, I definitely agree. I think there's a lot of, I guess you could say, almost cowboy fun
Yeah.
element to those vanity metrics of like, Yahoo, like look at this growth rate, look at this like, inbound, look at these impressions, look at all this exciting element of inbound and new people using it. But it is harder to kind of track like the churn. The churn happens silently, it's the
Yeah.
person who goes and just clicks cancel subscription, and you don't get a number around that unless you're really switched on to it and obviously have the right systems in place for you to know that. But it really is that leaky bucket killer then, right? When you think about this component around just how much retention compounds when you look at just the equational layer to it, and whatnot versus the other side. So, yeah, I definitely think referral growth components a really um, cool layer for where you know, advocacy programs, ambassador programs, this is where the work that we do can actually help a lot with growth and help, break into new markets and whatnot. Because you actually have the person who has the highest conversion likelihood as well, because people listen to them and trust
Yeah.
them more than they trust the brand to drive this element of growth. So this referral side through these advocates is the layer of growth that we think converts obviously the highest, and one that we think is like an important one for projects to consider more seriously than just slamming out the paid ads.
I totally understand. I think like a lot of what I've encountered is that people think the product does that. They think it's a great product is going to drive all of this and fix all of it, right? Like it's almost like they think I think it partially comes from the type of founder that's around here is more technical and less people focused. Um, and they tend to think that the product is like the solve for everything, and they that like these rates are sort of a symptom of a product instead of something that you should actually nurture uh, independently.
It's definitely something that comes up a lot in the conversations I've had. I would say too, though, that like 100% the product experience can play a huge part in how easy it is to refer people to it. Like, well, the best example really would be, I almost could like mock it here. Like, I would say Cursor, when it kind of came out, was growing. You probably had like, I don't know, 40%, maybe four out of every 10 people telling their friends about how amazing Cursor was around the family dinner, referring lots of people to it. And
Yeah.
like the churn with Cursor was probably quite low early on as well. Like they were just their growth rate was wild. They actually spent
Yeah.
$0 on marketing in their first year to grow to 100 million in annual recurring revenue, because that's how good like it spread through just organic like word of mouth developer circles, and it was such a new way of, you know, vibe coding and your IDE, environment. It was just a phase shift, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah.
Um, but no, I definitely think there's a balance of it for sure, where there it needs to be a degree, like when I say the GTC strategy, go to community strategy layer, it's mainly focused on value exchange versus value capture. So go to markets, like how do you capture attention? How do you go and get the eyeballs? And GTC, your go to community kind of strategy, is all about how do you design value exchange mechanisms. And the analogy is a component of using like a watering hole for GTC, where you're designing an area or an ecosystem where people come to and they get a lot of value there. If the value's from like the product, and like that's a huge component to the juice in that water, that's one layer to it. But then the experience with the people around you and in that whole ecosystem that allow you to spread that message is what is that nurture you're kind of talking about, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's, it's really fascinating. But there is, with this, I'll send this to you as well. You can check it out. But at the bottom here, I also added an element to a referral consultant. So this is a little skill file, just a big thing copied around elements to this equation and some of these older articles and all that's compounded together. So people listening, if you want the skill file as well, we're going to put it on our podcast site in the resources section, and we'll drop a little password in the comments where you can go and unlock that. But yeah, no, this is an interesting one, and I definitely enjoy the element of being able to, create these resources. Now I'm trying to, when I do more talks, I'm actually applying for a whole bunch of talks at conferences for the rest of this year. So maybe I'll catch anyone listening at some of those. And I always try and build some sort of AI skill file around the topic of like what I
Smart.
present,
Yeah.
because ultimately, you can take pictures of the slides, you can try and apply it, but like now everyone just uses their agent to do these different types of things. So do that same thing here. And I guess like maybe on that layer, how is like, and we haven't really talked about it at all, but maybe as we're starting to wrap here, out of curiosity, what is your like AI workflow when it comes to, how you're leveraging it in a certain
Mm.
sense right now? What's some of your, I don't know, quick hitters on how it's a big value for you and how you think about it?
Oh, well, I guess the way I'm using it mostly today is that when I started working on each of these brands, we came up with some core pillars of what they care about, what are they going to be posting, some examples of that content. And then I have a folder on my laptop with all of that um, up to date. And that really helps when you go to Claude and, I can basically say like, hey, I need a post about this, or more honestly, more often it's like, I have nothing to talk about today, like what should I post? And look at our narratives and like let's come up with something, knowing we have no news to go off of. And I find it to be like really helpful there, because it can just remind me about like everything I have on that list and pull up some good ones that we haven't talked about recently and go from there. And like I think it gives a great first draft. I don't think I've ever just straight up copy and pasted something to a post, but first draft is like, for me, it's always a part of the problem. It's like a big challenge to get that first draft. So it helps me a lot. And then the other thing that I personally find amazing is the image capabilities, because
Mm,
coming from my background, like I never developed those skills myself. It was not necessary on the paid search side. And so I would say like those skills for me personally are behind a lot of my other skills. But having AI image generation has helped me get a lot closer to post-worthy content really fast. And I think that like downstream that helps my designer. It's like we have one designer, and if I can give him something that's even like 60% there, uh, it's better than zero. Again, it's like a first draft. And actually, I just realized that Claude has great output in those image files. So they'll give you the SVG, which is like a fully editable file that a designer can work with. Whereas ChatGPT, which I think is often better at like giving you a real final output, but it's a flat image, and so you can't
Mm,
edit it very well. And so like that's a little tip, I guess, if you're deep in this stuff, is like Claude will give you an editable file that your designer can then work with. Problem is, it's not as good at generation.
yeah. Interesting. Yeah, no, I've also been using a lot of the Claude Design suite,
Yeah, it's
which
getting good.
is
It's getting really good.
pretty cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
the other thing, so like you've got these HTML files. Um, ChatGPT is now hosting sites. Uh, I think it's in their co-work kind of product, and
Right.
that was a gap for a while. Like I was doing similar things, and I'd have my reporting was being spit out as like an HTML file, and I'd share that in Slack, and it looks like code. You know, it doesn't look good. It's not what people are
Hmm.
used to. But now they're like adding in hosting capabilities so that you just have a URL for your thing. That's pretty awesome.
That's handy. Yeah, it saves you that step of like pushing it to a Vercel or something like that,
Yeah.
which a lot of people do. But epic. No, this is great. I guess like wrapping up here, any sort of last comments or topics or things you'd want to share with everyone listening? What kind of stood out for you the most? Anything you wanted to put in there?
Sorry, did you say topics? Last topics?
Yeah, any sort of last comments or anything you want to share with people? Anything you want to jam on as we kind of wrap it all? Any?
Um, the first thing that came to my mind is that I'd say if anyone's thinking about their community plans, it has been really helpful working with you guys in community. So like highly recommend talking to you. And yeah, it's one of those things that a lot of people I think, feel they can set up a Discord, but there is a lot more that can be done and insights that can be gleaned from really participating in it deeper. And it's been a really cool thing to see for NATO so far. Um, yeah, that's it.
Aw, well, I appreciate that. I would smash some heart emojis if I could. But
Yeah, yeah, it's been great.
uh,
I think like some of the, there's just different stages of business, and like at Avalanche, there was a time where I spent a lot of time in the Discord and learned a lot of those insights myself. And here I really don't have the time, and so like when I get on a call and the mods are able to say like this has come up multiple times, and here's how people feel about it. It's been really, I think, helpful, even if we're not always able to take action as quickly as I'd like. It's like really helpful to just get those snapshots.
totally. Yeah, I know. Definitely appreciate that. The team's crushing it, and I'm really overall bullish, even outside just direct community aspects. But with what everything you talked about with the product, with NATO, with the ecosystem, with the Kraken ecosystem, all that stuff, we're super energized and excited by it all. So, yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. As I popped up here a second ago, you can go follow Coop here on X. That's his handle, and myself as well. So awesome. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch you all on the next one. Appreciate you, Coop.
Thanks, Dan.